everybody. I'm glad you're here. You can be anywhere else, but you're here tonight, and you want to learn about God, and you want to hear these testimonies, and it is a blessing, and it edifies. So this is a good thing and a good night. So I'm really happy to be here, and so is my wife, even though we might be a little nervous, but it is what it is. It's Christ's story. It's not our story anymore. So we used to live that way, and now we're another way. And what you need to hear is about this is that it's not you. You can't clean yourself up. Christ gives it up for you. You have to surrender. That's the biggest thing. Make him the Lord of your life, and that is the key. Okay, I'm going to go to prayer. Dear Father God, I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'm thankful for this night. Lord, help us to see that we need that light that you gave in the beginning, that conscience that we sear, and you need to deliver us from the darkness of our sin and into the light of your glorious Son, Lord. And we can only do that when we surrender to you. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to start out, and then we're going to switch back and forth. So I started out, I grew up on a farm, homestead, and I was born into the Mormon cult. I was raised up in it, and it was religion. It was about things that you do and you check off a box. And so I grew up, we butchered our own animals, we did like gardens, we canned for 2 years. So we had 2 years of canning goods, like homestead, man. Like you were a farmer, you did the thing. So, and we had a farm walk tractor, and you always had to crank it to start it, and it'd always come back and crack your wrist. And then dad would go, okay, you're done, next kid. And so he just had kids to help out on the farm, basically, I thought. But he'd always go down to Mount Hope, and whatever animals were available, whatever was the cheapest, he bought them, bring them home, we raise them up, and then, you know, when we need to put them in the freezer, we put them in the freezer. So that's kind of my life and how I grew up. I think my first time siphoning gas to put it in my motorcycle, I was like 9. So I learned how to work on carbs and change oil on stuff, and Dad showed me all that. I was a mechanic, basically at 12. So the Mormon faith was a weird thing. It was good, like you studied and you learned a lot of scripture, but it was basically the golden rule, and you needed to endure to the end, and you needed to do the right thing, and you couldn't drink caffeine or you were going to hell. Like, it was like the worst. Like, I know even as a young kid, I was like, I can never live up to that. So what are we doing this for, you know? But I kept doing all the steps, kept checking the boxes, and at 13 I was a priest. And they sent me and a bunch of the other young priests, because they send them out on mission trips, and I don't know if you've ever seen elders badges and missionaries walking along the road. That was us. And so that was what I was going to do. And they took us to Washington, D.C., and I'll never forget it. I thought it was going to be a fun trip. We were going to go see the monument. No. We walked into this building, and it was like white gown behind kiosks, taking your name and sending, okay, you're going to go back to this room. Okay, what am I doing? Like, okay, this is weird. I was being baptized for the dead. So they would say somebody's name, and they would baptize me in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and put me under. I did 16 in one day. I felt like I was being waterboarded. I was like, I don't know, this is the weirdest thing ever. Like, okay, this is what I have to do for this? Okay. And the next day we went back, and there were 16 more. And by the last one, I was sat up and I said, what are you doing this for? Well, it's to give people hope that they're going to go in the higher kingdom. And I said, when they're dead, they can't make a decision. I said, this is wrong. And he looked at me like, and I was worried about getting excommunicated as a young kid, 13 years old. And that bus ride back was a lonely and scary bus ride, because I had to face my parents and tell them what I did, you know. But my dad, he's like, they believe you're going to be your own God one day. You wear sacred garments. He said he'd call me forward if I mess up too bad, and it was okay. He accepted that. And I was like, oh, that was cool. So I just went to church with him, but I was disconnected. I didn't want nothing to do with religion at that point. If that's what God was, I wanted nothing to do with it. And so, yeah, I went to Hopedale School to 4th grade, and then we went to Caddis, moved to Caddis at 4th grade, And then my brother started getting in trouble, the family started falling apart, it started getting crazy. And we were just living in the world then. It was just like, okay, free for all. We'd get in fist fights. It was bad. It was chaos. And so I do remember that my older brothers ended up getting in trouble, and I was like, you know what? That hurt my parents so much. I'm going to get in sports. And so, man, 7th, 8th grade, we were undefeated team. Freshman, I made varsity. I was playing football tackle both ways on defense and offense. And they were like, okay, this dude's going to go somewhere. And they were like, a new set of coaches came in, and they were like, well, we're not going to put your film to anybody, so good luck. And I was like, well, that's kind of nice, you know. So I've sat on the edge of my bed with a 12 gauge under my chin. You know, the first thing I thought of was, oh, I'm gonna hurt myself, and I'm not gonna do the job because I'm a failure. So, yeah, so, you know, that was my life growing up.
So I grew up in New Athens. If you don't know where that's at, you can blink and miss it when you drive through it. It's about an hour from here, and it was just me and my sister. My parents did not attend church. The town was small, but there were 3 churches in the town, and a Methodist, a Presbyterian, and like a non-denominational church. And so we went. My sister and my parents would drop us off. We'd go to church. As kids, we would play in the basement, and that was church. You know, we played in the basement. We'd go up the other half of church and listen. You know, I can tell you, in all the years I went there, I learned nothing. Obviously, going home to a family that was not attending church, there was no picture of anything to do with Christ anywhere in my life. So I would go to church, we'd play, our youth group would go ice skating in the winter, we'd, you know, do things in the summer, but there was no biblical teaching of any type that I can recall that ever had an impact on my life. My family, my dad would drink occasionally, my mom didn't drink, my grandfather was an alcoholic. So anytime he was over at the house and he'd have his cooler beer, I would I was his bartender. Every time he needed a beer, I'd give him one. I'd open it up and take a drink first and hand it to him, you know, and it was funny to everybody. And actually, at 2 years old, it was my family was working on a roof of a house, and they all left their beer sitting around, and they were up on the roof, and I went around and was drinking until I passed out on the couch. And my parents will still tell this story like it's funny to this day. And little did I know how funny it is not, because starting that young, while they may not think so, had a huge impact on my life, being as it was just free to do at my house, you know, like prom, we'd go to prom, we'd come back to my house and party. Like, so alcohol was never a big deal to my parents, so it wasn't a big deal to me. So I had a cousin who lived up the street from me, and we were inseparable. She was a few years younger than me, and to me, those were the religious influences in my life. Her mom was, was saved and very into church and God and talking to us about those things. And she's preaching to me or whatever. And so it was never something that I really accepted. And until we were teenagers and, the internet was, all the messaging stuff was just starting, and we were messaging this guy from England, and his name was Jesus Freak. And so he would talk to us about God on the internet. That's one good thing we, I guess, did on the internet. There were many other things that we didn't do that were very good. And so me and my cousin, we were, even though they were the religious influence in my life, she was also a negative influence in my life. Like, we would sit between the store and the post office and smoke cigarettes and play the purse trick. And the purse trick was, we would put a purse on the road by the stop sign, and a car would stop to like pick up the purse, and we'd have a string tied to it, and we would yank it and scare the crap out of whoever was in the car. That was how we entertained ourselves on Friday nights in a small town. Many a times we were chased. Thankfully, her parents lived close, and we would sneak to their house. But we would sit between the store and the post office, and we'd smoke cigarettes and whatever. So even though she was a positive influence, she was a negative influence in that she didn't live what was being talked to me. But at 15 or 16, we're talking to this guy on the internet, and her mom's talking to me, and, there's constant conversation about God and, what happens to you when you die? And I said, your body goes in the grave. Like, that's what happens when you die. Worms. And, what? Worms, yeah. And, so, like, after many, many conversations, finally, I believed what they were saying about Christ, and, and they're like, do you want to get saved? So we're on the internet with this guy, and I say a prayer, and it's funny, like, now I hear people's testimony, and they're like, my life changed so much at that point, like, different person. Me, nothing changed, because I was surrounded with nothing positive. There was nothing in my life that said, live like this. Everything in my life said, you can drink, you can do this, you can do that, you can, whatever you want to do. And so nothing in my life changed at that point.
So yeah, we ended up getting to where, like I said, it's getting worse and worse. Older brothers are just leaving. They come and go whatever they want. I'm still trying to do the right thing. That only lasts for so long when you do it by yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. When you don't have the help of the Lord, it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. So I wanted to get out, didn't have a way to do it, got a job. It really didn't make me much money, so I just saved up enough money to where I got fronted and I can flip. And so I just started doing that. And man, everybody's your friend when you do that, by the way. But guess what? When that ends, you don't have any friends. So they're friends, right? And so running pounds, hundreds, by the way. And one of my friends ended up getting in an argument, shot somebody outside. He went to prison. I wasn't there, thank God. So there was little things like that. My car broke down. I was drunk as a skunk, we called it. And they left me in the car on a back road and just walked away. And I woke up and I'm like, where are they at? Cops could have pulled, but that didn't happen. They made it back. They got me and took me. So there's like little things that was just like, okay, like they say to you, someone's looking out for you. One of those kind of things. And the conscience, like, that's wrong to do, but you're like, man, the rush of doing it. Well, that conscience is there, like I said, from the light from the beginning that God gave us. And we sear it. And we don't truly seek after him. There's no man that seek after God, right? No, not one. And so I didn't seek after God. I heard about it. I knew about it because I went to religious things. But now I don't have that in my life at all. So it's like 18 years of my life has just been in the time that we were getting together. The reason why I got started was her house was the house to party. That's how I came to be. And then her cousins took me in, and then that was that. And then, and so.
Like my big brothers.
Yeah. And so then I started hanging out at their house, and I took her sister to prom. And yeah, so I took her sister to prom. And then it was like a couple, friends. Yeah. And a couple years later, it was like, I think you were dating a guy, and she was somewhere at a dance or something, and I was just protective. It wasn't, there was nothing there at all. And I don't know why I said it, but I was like, dude, you do that again, I'm going to break every one of your fingers. But I didn't mean it as in like, no, I like her or anything. It was just a reaction, like protection, But anyway, so I go to Arizona. My family just up. And I find out later that my family just up and moves to Arizona for money and breaks the family apart for inheritance. I didn't know that. And I was leaving town, and she was like, "Are you leaving? Like, are we going to ever be together?" And I said, "Well, if it's meant to be, we'll come back together." And so do you want to pick up in that how you felt? Or no? Okay. So I went to Arizona for like it was a year and a half. I lived out there, helped my parents get set up, and came back. Families all scattered everywhere.
We wrote letters because
Yeah, we wrote letters. Like we still have them.
all the technology, the things.
Yeah.
But we wrote letters. I still have all of them. He would write to me from Arizona, and we just kept in touch that way. But our lives were separate. I mean, we're across the country from each other. I'm doing high school and college and, planning my life here. And, he was planning his life there until, he's like, I think we can make this work. And I was like, well, you have to come back and you have to talk to my parents, which, he had been around my family forever. So, yeah.
Yeah. So she said I call her. We talked every once in a while. I said, "So what's up? Are we good?" And she goes, "No, I think we have to break up because my mom says no long distance relationship." And I think it came out of my mouth, but I didn't mean to say it. Was tell your mom to shut up. I'm coming back. And so when I went out there, I had the mindset, man, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it on my own will. I'm going to be good. And I went out there and I did. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm good. I had money saved up. I dumped it into the car, bought some stuff, and I'm heading back to marry her. And so I drove back and straight back, knocked on the door. It was daytime by the time I got back, and I said, hey, I want to ask Elizabeth to marry me. Is that okay with you guys? And usually it's her mom because her mom makes all the decisions. No, she wasn't too happy. I wasn't the most favored at the time. But
we were living a wild life.
yeah, and it's all a joke to them, so it's acceptable. And so what do you do when it's acceptable? You just do whatever's right under your own eyes, And so we got married. You want to get?
No.
You're like ready to say something.
Well, we moved up here. I got a job up here. We moved up here and decided we moved next door to one of my cousins that he hung out with all the time and partied with. We had apartments right next to each other, and he was working over the road at the time, so I was kind of like starting a new job in a new place, and he was gone for like months at a time, and then he would come back, and so he finally quit that job because I was like, the money doesn't matter when we're not together, seeing each other, or I'm like basically living alone. So he moved up, like quit his job, came back, and then we surrounded ourselves with our friends that we had known forever, and my cousin, and so we partied. Like that's what we did. We drank, we smoked, we whatever. I was talking to Jen beforehand. I wouldn't have considered myself to be addicted to anything or whatever, but I was a functional alcoholic. I had a gallon of Crown in the fridge at all times, and so I could have a drink after work to relax, or whatever. But that's just what we did, and we bought a house out in the country, and that was so we could be loud and ignorant and not bother anybody. Now we use it for homesteading, and it's serving a better purpose now. But that's why we moved out there, so we could just party and have bonfires and just and live the fun life.
So even while I was still yet a sinner, Christ died for me, and he loved me. And so rewind on that, I was going to lose the apartment and everything. And I called a buddy, and I said, hey, can you help me out at all? He goes, yeah, I'll give you this dude's number, call him. And I called him, and they said it was for a millwright journeyman machinist job, and this would have made all the world if I'd have got it. And I called the guy, and he said, I need you in Vegas at this address on this date. And it was like that Monday, and it's like Friday. And you start Monday. And I'm like, oh no, how am I going to get there? So her cousin had a truck. I bought it for $500. God's good. I bought it for $500. I jumped in the S10, loaded up enough tools that I thought I needed, and I took off. I said, this is our break. I get to Effingham, Illinois, and the rear main seal blows out, and I'm blowing oil on the tractor trailer behind me. I have to take the exit, and I call the salvage yard that's in that town, and I say, this truck's here, it's broke down, you got to take it, or it's just going to sit here. Well, we can't do it without a title. I said, it's going to be here, and I left it there. I got on a 30-hour bus ride after conversations of just come home, just come home. I said, no, I believe this is what we need. This is what we have to have. And I got all the way there. My dad and the Mormons, here we are, still tie back. They sent me money to get on. The guy who was a Mormon, came and picked me up and took me to the bus, and he started trying to explain that stuff to me again. And I told him, and he even questioned his own, the Mormon faith. So maybe I witnessed to him. I don't know. It was in a weird way. But anyway, I got to my dad's house, and I said, I need a truck and I need tools. And he said, I got an S10 out there. I'm like, okay. And he said, I got a box of tools that's enough to rip down a 350 engine and put it back together. Good enough? Yes. And I drove, Hoover Dam, into Vegas, and I get to the site, and as soon as I get there, this is, my background because I told you what I was, and I get in the back of the truck, how ironic, by the way, and I lay down to try to take some sleep, and this guy is trying to break in the back of the truck. And I'm like, dude, I got a mag light. Don't even try it. And he went, and he took off, and then a cop comes up and says, what are you doing here? What are you trying to get? And he harassed me for like an hour. And then the place finally opened, I got the job, and now that's what bought us our house out where we were. So I was only there 6 months and was able to buy the house. That's how much money it was. So God was good, but yet here we're still going to jump back into sin and not realize what God is doing or drawing us to. Guys, you got to realize when something's moving in, God's calling you and drawing you. You just need to say yes, because this is the thing that you need. You need Jesus. You need salvation, and you need the Spirit of God in you. So just putting that out there. So like she said, we just got out in the woods and partied. That's what it was. My brother would say, hey, drinking this weekend? Yep. Yeah, every weekend. And it was like, so what was cool about how God works, this is what's so awesome. He would give me jobs that I would have to be accountable. I'd have to do drug screens. I had a wife that I needed to be accountable to now, so I'm starting to feel the pressure of having to be accountable, right? I still wore the stuff in the boot to pass the P test. I still trying to hold on a little bit. But this became more important. Priorities became more important. Things, it was like, okay, so now I just drink. And I hated drinking, to be honest. Her cousins will even tell you, I hated it.
I hate it when you drink because it's too big when you pass it out.
So it was like, okay, so, I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd say, you stupid idiot, you done it again. I don't know if anybody's been there. You look in the mirror and you go, you did it again. Why did you do it again? Well, I'm going to do it again. And this is why. In Romans 5:12 it says, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. And so what that means is that you are inherent to sin from birth. You don't know any better. You're going to do whatever you want if there's no guidance and no moral compass. So the Bible lays that out. I mean, and man, when you apply that stuff to your life, when you apply these verses and you come and get plugged in and you do the daily thing and you live as Christ every day, man, you can beat that thing. So that's what we're getting to now.
So we'd been married about 8 years, and I got pregnant, and we were super excited, call everybody we ever met in our life and tell them about it, because, when you're married that long, everybody's been asking you for the last 8 years, when are you going to have kids, when are you going to have kids, when are you going to have kids, and so we're so excited and call everyone, and hit about 12 weeks, and I start bleeding, and so go to the hospital. He's at work. I'm all alone in the ER. You know, the lady I work with, because I work at the hospital, does my scan, and she's like, let me go get the doctor to come in and talk to you. I know what's happening, you know. So I had a miscarriage, and I can tell you when you don't have God in your life, that's a very lonely time. Even though I'm married, it was lonely. He doesn't know what my body's going through, what my emotions are going through. He's going through his own emotions. So how do you deal with that when you don't have God? You drink, you know. So I drank, and I drank more, and that's how I coped with that. Nobody in my family knew what I was going through, so very, very lonely time. And so we just continued on the same path until, what was it, almost 2 years later, I get pregnant again. And at that point, he's working at a job hauling crude oil and starting to have conversations with a guy that he worked with.
Yeah, so that was Sunbelt, and I hauled heavy equipment, and I could bring the equipment home for free. That built my house. All I had to do was put fuel in it, use it, take it back. I drove the semi, I took it, I built my own house. So before that, I say, honey, I'm sorry. I come back off the road, and I find out that the guy just built like shoddy work. The house was falling over the hill. We had to tear like half of it off. And then miscarriage. And then, okay, now we're to 600 square feet. And we're like, can it rate? Okay, so, you know, this was us. And we rode it. We rode that, okay? You know what's cool about having Christ in your life? When these do this, you're like this. You're like, okay, we'll handle it. It's good. And we didn't have that. And so it was like, take it down and deal with it. I mean, that was what we wanted to do. That's what was our life. Yeah. And so it was like we finally get ready to have another one. And during that time, I said, we can't live like this. So I brought an excavator home, and I just dug the foundation. I'd work full day, come home, lay enough block to where it was dark, get a shower, and I did that every day. And I added on 1,700 square feet onto 600. I bit off way more than I could chew, but I did it anyway. And I'm painting the bedroom for Callum, and she's going into labor. I'm like, please, come on. We get in there, and they're like, oh, no, you can go back home. And she's like, no, there's no way I can go back home. We went back home, and I was like, great, I get to finish. No, we got to go back. I'm like, okay, so we went back, and we had Callum. So,
That's
good. So now we hit this real bad low, and man, dude, it got to where it was like, okay, it was kind of a breaking point. You're drinking so bad that you can't even walk, and you pee on the floor like a dog. It was done. It was breaking point. So, buddy witnessed to me at Sunbelt, and he said, hey, you ever think about Christ and giving him a chance and all this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I believe in Christ, man. I went to church. I know what that's all about. You ain't telling me, you know, kind of thing. And I just blew him off. But man, that's when the spark was lit. And when you drive, you think a lot. And I'm driving, and I'm hitting Amish country, and it's like, I see those signs on the side of the road. Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. No man gets the Father but by me. And then you see the next sign, and it's like, you must be born again. And I was like, born again? What? So, blow that off. Kevin gets to another job, crude hauling, and he says, hey, come to this job. Get your hazmat right now. And so, thank God for that brother. You know what I mean? Thank God for Kevin Housel. And so, I get there, and I know that there's something that I need to do. And so, I got to tell you guys, it was the torment of dark and light, and I was miserable. And I remember it was on July 11th of 2014 that I drove to the Pine 2D well site, and I was like, what's this born again? What's it? And boom, it was just like, I know what I got to do. So I walked down to the bottom of the steps, fell to my knees in the gravel, and I said, whatever's left of me, you can have. All of it.
And so he's coming home and talking to me about, like, getting saved and all this. And I'm like, okay, and he's like, we need to find a church. And I'm like, I've been there, done that. It did nothing in my life. My life didn't change because I got saved or I got to church. And he was 0 to 100 right now. Like, I want to go to church. And so I'm like, we're living paycheck to paycheck and this and that. And come home one day and I like had a bill that like needed paid like right now. And it just so happened in my mailbox happened to be a check, refund, something, just the amount that I needed to pay that bill. And I was like, I walked in the house and I was like, okay, we can go to church. And he's like, what? And I was like, I don't know, just something is telling me like, okay, we got to go do that. And so we start looking and we end up here, thankfully. And I sat down for one service and I learned more in an hour here than I ever heard my entire life, whether that be because my eyes are finally open or I know we have good teaching here, so I know that's it too. But I was like, and he's like, do you want to, like, we thought we'll just jump around to different churches and see where we want to go. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I said, we're not going anywhere else. Like, we're staying here. And so they're talking about discipleship, and he signs up for discipleship, and I'm learning, he's like, you need to sign up for discipleship. And I'm like, no. You got me in the church, okay, let's go one step at a time. And I was a rebellious teenager, and I wasn't much better into my, adulthood and as a wife. And so it's like, thankfully, God has changed that in me now. But so he was just all in for God, and I was still not quite there yet. Until it took me a lot of time to decide, and he was through discipleship, through MTT, which is another 2 years, and finally one Sunday they were preaching about the path of growth, and you need to do this, and and he wasn't sitting beside me, and I filled out the card and threw it in the collection plate and thought, okay, I can't turn back now. And so after church, I told him, I was like, I signed up for discipleship, and he was like, cool, like he was being all calm, but if you ask him, he was like screaming inside with excitement. And it's just been awesome from there. We both have been through discipleship, MTT. We're both attending LFBI. Anything we can do to get more in us, because Christ has given us so much. Like, we owe him everything, and it's all I want now is to just be here, have my family here, raise my son a different way, which is difficult when your family is still the way that they are and they don't understand. That's been a challenge, and we've had issues there, but it's my son, and I want to raise him in the admonition of the Lord, and that's thankfully something we're doing together.
Yeah, so I fell to my knees at the Pine 2D. I said, Lord, whatever's left of me, you can have. And I meant it. And I never felt a love like that. Right now. He cleared my language up. There was a couple other things I was like, how about these things? He's like, not yet. You got to work on those. And so I said, okay. And I said, whatever you have for me, I'll say yes. I had to die to myself today to come here. I had to die to myself to say yes to Kevin. That's what you have to do. You have to walk in the Spirit and do it every day. And man, so I got in the Bible, I read it through in 8 months, received discernment. We came here, I was like, discipleship is it, man. And then when discipleship was getting to the end, I was like, man, I got to do MTT. There's no way I can stop now. Got done with MTT, I said, there's no way I can stop with I got to do LFBI. God, where do you want to take me? Where do you want to send me? I'll go. I mean, that's where I went, like right now. And it was funny because when I read that Bible through in 8 months, I trained a guy. He received salvation, and I only had my testimony and what I had in the Bible. I mean, it was instantaneous. He's given me fruit because I wanted to live for him. And dude, it's awesome. So, you have anything? Okay. So that's it. So now it's just whatever God has for us. And there's not going to be a no. It's going to be yes. And he's going to stretch me, and he's stretched me more and more, and he can stretch me all he wants. Because I know that he's got me, and I know that his word is true. And I can live it for the rest of my life. We pray.